Oh yeah! Welcome back to the K Max, and I thought I'd just interrupt my training session here in this beautiful outdoor gym, one of the best gyms I've ever come across. And I've come across a lot of gyms around the world, from Venice Gym to Santa Monica Gym to Miami gyms, all outdoor type gyms, and this is just magnificent. It's underneath the Remarkables that makes the atmosphere training even more remarkable. And as you can see, I was doing a bit of training, and you may ask, hey Kman, what are you training for? Well, at the moment I'm training for sprinting. I want to increase my explosive speed and my sprint performance. And you may ask, yeah, but you were sort of slowly jogging there. You could almost say I was plug jogging. And I might respond, go, yeah, I was, because I'm working on my foundation. I'm building my base. I'm improving my cardiovascular base, and that stronger, thicker base will be able to raise my peak when I go into the sprint phase to increase my speed. And that sounds pretty convincing. However, it could be convincingly wrong, because just because it sounds sincere and convincing doesn't mean it's right. It could be sincerely, convincingly wrong. And a lot of times people will use those general terms of, yes, I'm building my foundation, I'm building my base, and we think, yeah, that makes sense. You've got to get a base because, you know, the foundation, I'm in this beautiful area underneath the Remarkables, and there's lots of development going in buildings and homes being built, and all of them, and I've been observing, they all have a base. They build a foundation. Yes, and they get the foundation, and then they design the house and build the house on top of that, layer it up to the roof until it's finished. And if I asked, you know, what's in your foundation, you'd find that the builder and the engineer and the supplier of the foundation would know exactly what is in the foundation. The contents of the concrete, the amount of sand, the amount of stone, the amount of cement, the amount of additives in there, taking into account how strong it has to be, how durable, how mobility has to be, because we live in New Zealand, so they get a little bit of shaky earthquakes here. So you'd find a builder, an expert, who's an expert in their expertise, would know the ingredients of the foundation of a base of a home and every other aspect of the home. So when you say, I'm building a foundation or a base for my training, then you'd expect that if I ask you exactly what components of the foundation are you building? Is it your cardiovascular fitness, your MVO2? Is it changing your respiratory quotient? Are you more working on muscular endurance, increased glycogen concentration? Are you looking at increasing activation of your fast muscle fibers, maybe the training and the transition of your fast oxidative glycolytic fibers? What exactly are you building? Is it what physiological component, anatomical component are you building? Because foundation is just a very broad generic term. What is that foundation actually made up of? And if you find that, hey, well, maybe that word is really impressive and it maybe sounds great, but if I dig down and get into the dirt, then maybe I don't really know what that is. So yeah, I guess the point of this session is so that when you say a foundation or a base or any training program, no matter what it is, it's really important as an exercise professional that you know all the components from an anatomical, physiological, biomechanical point of view that make up any phase of your training to justify that phase to go to the next phase, and making sure that that phase is actually building what you build, because sometimes you might be building a foundation for the wrong outcome. You think that this foundation is getting you that, but actually when you break it down and look at it, it's actually getting you something else. And that's about self-justification for yourself as an exercise professional, be able to deliver your programs to yourself and to other people with integrity, knowing that you've done everything possible to make it the most integral, effective, best program, efficient program that you can possibly make. And Rory puts this beautiful saying on everything that she does or she comes across, and she asks this question: why am I doing this and how does it work? And when you say, why am I doing this, then you have to know the specific outcomes of what you want to achieve. And then you have to say, how does it work? How does all the ingredients of this training, the reps, the sets, the duration, the work ratio, the intensity, the frequency, the volume, how is that all blended together to guarantee that I'm going to get the best of my training time, the biggest bang for my buck? So I'm going to go through 5 questions that you can ask yourself and any program that comes upon your table when it comes to training, and ask these questions and dig a bit deeper. So if you dig deep, you will get more closer to the truth, rather than staying on the superficial claims and the promises and the hope and thinking, well, it sounds good, but let's hope it works, rather than guaranteeing that it works. And I used to do that. I've been in this profession now for 40 years, and in my earlier phase of my career, I specialised in the elite conditioning for international Olympic level athletes and sporting teams. And so much so I ventured down it because I always wanted to know more, because if I know more I can grow more, and I wanted always to make sure that I did the best for my athletes, that I gave them my best. Therefore, to do that I had to be the best. So I did further study from a degree to a master's degree, and I specialised in strength and conditioning for elite athletes, sporting teams, and my master's was done on some of the international teams that I work with. I more went in the area of speed and strength and power and strength development, and I used baseball teams, international baseball teams, as my measuring stick, because baseball is very explosive, very powerful, relying on speed and strength. And so much so I got 2 internationally recognised scientific published research studies out of it. But in that journey, I didn't do that to impress anybody, but just to build myself. So I wanted to, if I'm going to commit to this for the rest of my life, then I want to become the best I can, so I can do the best for my athletes. In that journey, yes, I learnt lots of things, but I always seeked the truth, the justification of what I was doing. And I'd always ask this question: why am I doing this, and how's this linked to the outcome, and is it going to be the best form of training for them, and is it effective, is it efficient, and most of all, is it safe, or it's not going to hurt them? So the 5 questions that you have are what I share with you when you come across any program or plan or cycle. And I will focus on the foundation today, what people say the foundation, because obviously that's one of the topics of interest, and you got to be able to dissect that to see what is that, to make sure that the claim is matched by the proof. The first question to ask when you the first box is just use the common sense. When you look at the training regime or the training activity, and you say, okay, does it look like it's building what it's claiming to build? So if I say to you, look, I want to build my foundation of jogging to get better at sprinting, you may ask, well, does that make any common sense? You're training slow to perform fast. Well, maybe there's a question mark to be put on that one. If I'm saying I'm increasing my cardiovascular fitness for running, but I go swimming, and I'm not to say that swimming doesn't build your cardiovascular system, but is it the best base that you can build in that activity for running? So if I want to get better at running, then why am I swimming? So that doesn't make any possible common sense. If I'm exercising on the ground but I perform in the upright position, if I'm training on the ground to perform in the upright, then you say, well, that doesn't sort of make any common sense. So the common sense is a good overall measurement of, okay, that doesn't make any sense, so let's dig it deeper, and if it doesn't make any sense, it's probably nonsense. So as the old classic saying goes, the first one is the common sense rule. The second one is the position, what I used to call the overall body position, and that's sort of an extension of the common sense rule. If I'm performing in the upright position but I'm training on the ground, well, my body is on the laying down supine position, but I'm actually training in the upright position. Well, that doesn't make any sense. If I'm swimming to increase my running speed, then I'm in completely different positions. One I'm laying down and the other one I'm standing up. So a lot of people will put their bodies in interesting positions, whether it be laying on the ground or laying on balls of air and rolling around, or hanging from ceilings on vines and stuff like that. And you say, well, first of all, it doesn't make any common sense, but also the reason why it doesn't make any common sense is because your body's in a completely different environment, it's a completely different position overall. So that doesn't make any sense. Why do I train my abdominals in the laying down position when they perform in the upright position? Well, that doesn't make any common sense, but also just purely from a position, I'm training my abdominals or whatever it might be in the laying down position, which is not the position that I perform in, because I perform in the upright position if I have an upright. Maybe there might be some form of conditioning on the ground if you're a wrestler or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu type, and that might be justifiable. So number one is common sense. Number two is your position. And Even if you even go even further, if you look at the actions of sprinting versus jogging as I use, when I jog I stay more upright, when I'm sprinting I'm really leaning forward. So straight away there is a slight difference in body position from sprinting to jogging. So that position doesn't sort of match up either, because ideally you want to make sure that all the roads that you're building in your foundation lead to Rome or lead to peak performance, and they're leading in the right direction. All the paths, all your anatomical, physiological paths are leading that way. The next question is what I call biomechanics. Biomechanics is looking at more of a breakdown. We looked at more broad, common sense, broad body position. Now we're getting a bit deeper into biomechanics, means the movement patterns of the actions that you're doing in training, and those movement patterns, are they related or specific or more applied to the functional outcome? So you might be training for sport specific reasons or just general functional reasons for life or performance for sport or whatever it might be. You have to look at, yes, the common sense, the position, and now the biomechanics. What are the actual joints doing? And I use different examples to which not necessary to limit yourself to that sport, but to go use those principles and philosophies to be able to apply to all sports that you're involved in, or all activities or goals that you're involved in, so you can dissect it all and break it all up and see it for what it is, and then say, okay, well, those ingredients are, yes, they're in sync with my performance dreams or outcomes or goals, or wait a minute, they're not at all. I'm actually spending a lot of time and effort on something which isn't going to make any difference and could be counterproductive in terms that it's taking away time where you can do something else, counterproductive that it's training the wrong systems or the wrong anatomical structures or the wrong physiology, means it can be contradictory to your performance, can reduce performance, and it could also have that volume repetitive strain effect where it actually could lead to injury because you're just doing inappropriate activities, and I'll share some examples of that as well. So biomechanics is looking at individual joints in the training programs or exercises, and it's a bit more micro observation to say, okay, that's connected, that's heading in that direction, or versus, well, wait a minute, all my actions, I want to go north, but actually my actions are heading me south. So that's not the direction I want to go. So you got the biomechanical, then you got the muscular activities of the muscle activation, because different goals and different performance levels require different muscular involvement, different muscular levels of force and power and production, and then we go into, once you go into that, then you have the physiology. Is it the appropriate physiology? Means the physiology is the fuel that feeds the muscular to move the biomechanics, which is the joints, to perform in the body position that you want. So really, they see how they're connected. You got the physiology, which is the fuel, means the petrol in the car that fuels the muscle, which is the engine, that then moves the joints, which is the wheels, that then moves the whole vehicle in the right position, and then common sense in the right direction. So the physiology of what you're doing, and then I guess last is what I call more the psychology. Is that activity preparing not just your body but your mind for that level of performance? So if you're not used to training the mind to adhere to the pressures and the stress that are applied in that sporting activity, then you may find if you train lazy, then you're not going to perform with focus, if that makes sense, because the body will only go where the mind will allow it, which is the overall psychology in the overall program. We'll talk more about that. So if I use a few examples, one of the little ones which are simple, which I just used, jogging in, and I'm training that as a foundation to build a base and a strong foundation to prepare me for sprinting. Now, not to say that some activities that you may implement into your overall training program that you use, but not necessary to build a base, but you may use them for therapeutic reasons. You may use them for maybe a bit of variety in the off season to take the normal repetitive stresses off the joints and the muscles in the body that are more in that sport. You're going to keep training the body, but in a different environment to relieve those stresses, but still apply good stresses in the body to keep it fit, strong and healthy. So that may have a form of cross training in the appropriate time. In the off season, you may use some activities for more therapeutic reasons. It means you're rehabilitating from an injury or whatever it might be. You're trying to unload certain joints, but you still want to train the cardiovascular system, even though you can't use those specific joints. And we'll dive deep into that. And possibly you may do some activities as just a bit of a mental break, a bit of recreational type thing, just to keep you sane rather than doing the same old focus. But you've got to make sure that they're all in a proportional level that add to the value of the overall program, not take from it. They add to pushing you in the right direction. Sometimes you need a bit of time out. Sometimes you've got to take the race car off the track and get a bit of a service and give it a tune up and get it back on the track, and understand that. But that's more supplementary reasons. So I want to focus more on the foundation to actually build that elite level of performance that you want to achieve, whether it be for your life or for your sport. So I may say, okay, common sense here, plug jogging is not necessarily making any common sense that's going to enhance as a foundation for me to sprint. That just doesn't make. Why would you train slow when you want to perform fast? Common sense, big question mark there. If you have a look at the overall body position, plug jogging, I'm more upright, and body position in sprinting, I'm more dynamic in this way. So from a position point of view, yes, it's upright, but it's certainly different center of gravity. When I'm plug jogging, my center of gravity is more down my midline, but to sprint, I need to lean more further forward. So from a body position, it's not going to be in sync directly with sprinting. So I'm training the body in an upright position, where in sprinting, I'm really getting that forward lean. Then we go to the biomechanics. The biomechanics is obviously the breakdown of the individual joints. Well, first of all, let's start from the bottom up. When I plug jog, I tend to heel strike the ground. I hit the heel on the ground, and I run this way. And I basically hit the ground with the heel, and then from there I'll supinate, and then I'll pronate the foot. And that's basically how the foot works. Everyone's slightly different, I understand that, but it's heel, toe, heel, toe. That's what we tend to do when we jog, because that's efficient and it gets me going, and it's efficient to keep me going for a long period of time. But when you look at sprinting, when they take off, bang, they're pushing off the toes, and they're pushing through the toes with maximal speed. So even if you got that one particular joint of the biomechanics of the ankle, you'd find that they're very, very different from heel strike to toe versus toe to push into sprinting. Not to mention all the other aspects which I briefly mentioned is the biomechanics of my body when I'm sprinting in full action versus plug jogging. And when I plug jog, or just jog, which we call long, slow distance, it's not as critical as it is in sprinting. Where in sprinting, it's a short period of time, everything counts. So you have to be as effective and efficient as possible. But when I'm plug jogging, I could every now and again scratch my head like this as I'm jogging, or my arms out here. When sprinting, I can't run like that, because that's not biomechanic. I need everything to be in that straight line, efficient, effective type movement path to sprint, not like this, or I can't scratch my head halfway through, because that's not biomechanically sound. But I can get away with it in plug jogging, but I can't get away with it in sprinting. From a muscular point of view, obviously, they involve the same muscles, but obviously in sprinting you're going to involve a lot more calves in the push-off, because it's pushing through the heel. Your arms are going to be a lot more powerful. If you just look at the physical structure of the frame of a sprinter versus a long-distance runner, then you can see there's going to be a big muscular difference, whether it be, obviously there's some genetics plays in that, but also how you train for that. So sprinting, from a muscular point of view, relies on the activation of what we call fast twitch muscle fibers. Now, there's 3 types of muscle fibers in 3 categories. Now, there are more subcategories to that. But you start off with the slow twitch muscle fibers, then you have your intermediate fibers, which are FOG fibers, fast oxidative glycolytic fibers, and then you have your pure fast twitch muscle fibers called your fast glycolytic fibers. So the slow twitch muscle fibers, they're slow. They don't generate as high amounts of force, but they have a high level of endurance. You can go for a long period of time. Then you have the other extreme is the fast glycolytic, which is the pure fast twitch there. Large fibers, hence why a lot of sprinters and power-based, strength-based sports people are bigger. They're large fibers. They contract quickly, they generate high amounts of force, but they have a low endurance. That's why you can't, sprinters can't go for as long past that 10 seconds. We'll get more into that. And then you have those intermediate fibers, your fast oxidative glycolytic, and they can be conditioned or trained to take on characteristics of the slow twitch muscle fibers or characteristics of the fast twitch muscle fibers. So if I train slow, two things happen. When I train slow, jog, I'm not activating the fast twitch muscle fibers. I'm not activating that part of the engine of the car to go fast. I'm just activating that part of the engine to go slow. So I'm training my slow twitch muscle fibers to get into a rhythm and go for long distance and lower forceful contractions for a longer period of time. But also a part of that, I'm conditioning those intermediate fibers, the fast oxidative glycolytic fibers, to take on characteristics of the slow twitch muscle fibers by changing the enzyme concentrations around the fiber. And if I'm going to train those intermediate fibers and I want to go fast, why do I train them to go slow when I want to train them to go fast? We call that specificity of training. You know, how you training will determine how you perform. So from a anatomical, from a muscular point of view, sprinting requires more fast twitch muscle activation rather than slow twitch. So why do I train a lot of my training time on slow twitch when I can train the fast twitch? So from a muscular point of view, doesn't make a lot of sense. From a physiology point of view, as you already know, we have basically three energy systems. And the energy systems are the systems that fuel the body to perform. And there's three energy systems. You have the phosphate energy system, which is the breakdown of an energy-rich molecule held in the cells of the body called adenosine triphosphate, and also stored with creatine phosphate. So adenosine triphosphate it gets broken apart, releases energy, and you can express maximum energy for about a couple seconds. After those couple of seconds, you've broken all the ATP apart, and then you need to rebuild it by using creatine phosphate or CP. And that rebuilds the ATP to extend that maximal output of force for a longer period of time, and that can go up to 10 seconds. The perfect example would be a 100-meter sprinter. It's around 10 seconds of maximal speed all the way. And obviously things like shock putters and high jumpers and any short, brief, intense activity will rely on the phosphate energy system. That exhausts itself very quickly after about 10 seconds. 2 seconds for the phosphate, and then another up to 10 seconds for the phosphate with the creatine phosphate involvement. Then you go into the lactate energy system where you can't rebuild those ATP stores, so therefore you now rely on another source to rebuild those ATP, which is the breakdown of carbohydrate in food or glucose in the blood, but we call it glycogen in the cells. So we break down glycogen. That's called the lactate energy system. So what we do is we start breaking down glycogen, which takes slower, that gives us energy to rebuild the ATP so we can endure a bit further. But we can't endure at the same speed as the phosphate. We have to drop the speed down to keep going. But we're still going fairly fast, but not sprinting. We're fast, but not sprinting. And that can extend our production of energy to perform for up to 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, depending on the intensity that you're going. But that's the phosphate interaction with the lactate. Then if you want to keep going in endurance, where you want to keep going for a long time, then the lactic acid builds up, and then you need to tap into other sources of energy using oxygen, and we call that the aerobic energy system. So anaerobic, which is the first two systems, which is phosphate and lactate, that's your anaerobic systems. Then you have your aerobic system where you breathe in oxygen to break down your fuel aerobically, which takes longer, and you break down your fat, your carbohydrate, and a little bit of protein. And that produces energy at a slower rate to rebuild the ATP. Because you're producing energy at a slower rate, it takes slower to rebuild the ATP, to use the ATP to produce energy. So therefore you go slower, but you have not endless, but you have a lot more storage of carbohydrate and fat, particularly fat in the body, to break down to really take you a long way, but you can't go at that same pace. So they're the three energy systems. Sprinting obviously is in the phosphate system. In the lactate system is things such as the 400-meter run, which is around about a minute, around the minute of maximal effort around the 400-meter track, and if I restrict my analogy to running. And then you have the long distance 5K, 10K marathon, which is the aerobic. So if I want to train and be specific physiologically to sprinting, I want to be tapping in conditioning and developing all the enzymes around phosphate energy production in those first 10 seconds rather than lactate or aerobic. So doing long distance running, yes, it's building a foundation, but it's not directly building a foundation to really stimulate or develop or enhance my phosphate energy system. you're training by heading south, but you want to go north. It's the opposite ends of the spectrum. Aerobic conditioning way down here in the energy timeline. You can't see my hand, and phosphate right here in the start of the energy. So marathon running or long distance training here, and this end is sprint training or phosphate activation, aerobic activation, and something in between is going to be the lactate. So that's the next question: is your training foundation, is it activating the right energy system or the fuel supply for that activity? Because you have three different sources of fuel. In petrol, in a car, you only have one, which is petrol. And petrol is, I guess, in the body like ATP. But in the car, we break the petrol apart that produces energy or releases energy, and then the car goes. And when the petrol runs out, we fill it back up. But the body has an amazing ability to break that energy apart, which is ATP, which is the body's source of petrol. But we don't fill it back up. We can, obviously, indirectly through carbohydrate and fats through our food, but straight away we can rebuild that ATP. But to break molecules apart, that releases energy. To rebuild the ATP, we need energy, and that's where we get that energy from breaking down our substrates of energy, which is your fat, carbohydrate, and protein. So we break down that energy to rebuild the petrol to drive the engine. But the speed of rebuilding determines what energy system we're in. So if you're in the phosphate, it's very quickly and it's all broken down. If you want to we rebuild it using CP for up to 10 seconds. But if you want to keep going at a high intensity, we have to drop it down, because now we have to break down glycogen, anaerobic without oxygen, and that can rebuild the ATP at a lower rate. It's still fast, but extends us up to 2 minutes. And then if you want to keep going, then we have to access oxygen to break down fat and carbohydrate, a little bit of protein aerobically, and that goes slower. Therefore, I can rebuild the ATP, but overall I'm reducing energy at a slower rate, because energy is being delivered at a slower rate to rebuild the molecule to produce energy. I'm not going to dig too deep. I know I probably went a bit deeper than I wanted to there, but that gives you an understanding. Is your training from a physiological point of view, is it linked to the outcome and the performance? So that is the physiological aspect. So we've got common sense, we've got position, we've got biomechanics, we've got muscular, we've got physiology, and the last one is that mental mindset. Does your training get you mentally prepared for the focus and the pressure and the pressure makes diamonds for that event? If you look at if I'm going jogging, yes, I can have a bit of a chat to my friend, and I can daydream a bit, and I can look at the beautiful mountain behind me and all sorts of stuff. But if I'm going to do a sprint, then that's a different mindset, because the body will only go with their mind will out. So sprinters, you watch them at the start line, they're all focused and they're really mentally focused. And for a short burst, because everything counts, that mental focus can really activate the body by stimulating the endocrine system or the hormonal system to get it all agitated and aggravated and get it ready for that fight-flight response, and release the adrenaline and all of those great hormones and cortisol to release the energy for that activity. So yes, that you have to ask, is this training not just the body, but is also training my mind? So that was obviously an easy one to look at. If I look at some other examples that I've been exposed to or I've been involved in over the years, just to give you some examples so you can get a grasp of the process of analysing and breaking down a foundation and making sure that that foundation is the right foundation that's going to take to the peak of your performance, and it's going to be the right outcome. Then that's really important. Another one part of my journey, as I said, I was involved in my masters in elite level baseball, and I worked with national, international baseball teams. I worked in the US in the Major League with the Milwaukee Brewers for a period of time. And I always remember in my experience coming across some things in the culture and tradition of certain sports, whether it be baseball or other sports I've been involved in, and I think, well, that's what they're doing doesn't make a lot of sense. And a lot of the sports I've been involved in, I haven't had any practical experience in. I'm not a baseballer. I used to play cricket. I'm involved with the Olympic teams and Olympic level kayaking through the Australian Institute of Sport. I'm not a kayaker. I fall out of kayaks. But because I had, I guess, those virgin eyes, and I look at things which I don't have any emotional connection with, or not connected to tradition, or this is the way it's always been done, and this is how some guru in the past has did it, then I'm more likely to see it for what it is rather than what I want it is. And that was, I guess, one of my advantages, is because I had quite an analytical mind when you're looking at things, and be able to break it down and not being emotionally connected to it, so I can actually see what it is rather than what I want it to be. So baseball is one of those classic examples where a lot of the training protocols and training methods didn't make a lot of sense, because how does that relate to baseball? Or even in kayaking, how does that relate to kayaking? And over time I had an influence in developing programs that use science and anatomy and physiology and biomechanics as the foundation to improve people's performance. So I'm no technical baseball coach or kayaking coach or technique coach, no idea. Martial arts and fighting, I'm very good at that. I've been doing that since I was 10 years of age, but these are not. But I do know anatomy, I do know physiology, do know biomechanics, because I guess my master's was in sports biomechanics. So technically speaking, I'm a sports biomechanist, because I'm involved in muscles and forces and angles and all sorts of that fun stuff. So baseball was a classic. I remember working with a team of pitchers, or working in the off season. I looked at pitching, and if you look at baseball pitching, it's explosive. Basically you get a ball, you're on a mound, and you got to throw the ball as fast as you possibly can. Excuse if you're a baseballer pitcher watching my technique. Don't laugh. No, have a good laugh. And you get there and you line up and you whoosh, and you throw the baseball as fast as you can, whether it be a straight ball, curve ball, and all that involves different slight adaptations in technique. But it's very, very explosive. So if we have a look at that overall analogy, if you break it all down and you go through that process, you can say, okay, well, I can break it down from a common sense, from a body position, from a biomechanics, from anatomy, from a muscular, and all that sort of stuff. So I train these guys based on the good principles of all those components which I just shared with you. And we're coming into the pre-season, and I was training them, and then I'm not involved in the runnings of their baseball training, but I'm in control of what they do in the gym and off the field. But I was out training one night, and I was running where the pitchers were, because at that time in the pre-season they said they were the strongest they've ever been. They had no injuries. They were throwing the fastest they ever have. They felt the best they ever have. And they were powering up. They said, when I throw a ball, you can see fire and smoke come off it. Slight exaggeration, but that's how they felt. And I was very happy that I got them to their peak physical condition, so then they can apply that physical strength and power and speed to their technique of their pitching to prepare them for the upcoming season. And I was at training and they weren't there, and I said, where are all the pitchers? And then they all came jogging in. And I said, where you been? And they said, well, I've just been for our run. We're doing a 5K run, and we're going to build that to a 10K run. And I said, well, why are you doing that? And they'd been advised by another person who was a colleague of mine, but they were more in control on that side of things, where I was in control of the gym, but they were more in control of this. And I said, why are you doing that? He said, well, that's going to build our base. It's going to build our foundation, so we can have the endurance of pitching throughout innings. Now, an innings consists of anywhere between 60 to maybe top end 100 pitches, and they don't stop pitching because they're not fit or they're not strong. It's just because they're smaller muscles, the rotator cuff, the full rotator cuff, which is the supraspinalis, infraspinalis, teres minor, and subscapularis, particularly in pitching, puts a lot of stress on those structures, those small stabilizing muscles that are deep in the glenohumeral joint, and they put a lot of strain on the infraspinalis and teres minor, which are the lateral rotators, and they're more the eccentric contracting brakes of the shoulder joint. And I'm not going to go into it, but you really have to look after them, because if those little muscles flare up or tear or get strained or whatever, then they're not pitching at all. So the only reason why they stop pitching is not because of the physical fitness and strength, it's more those smaller muscles. So I'm thinking to myself, what is long distance running? I can't remember seeing a baseball game where the pitcher has gone for a 10K run during the game. Because you don't run in pitching. All you do is you stand on the mound, and don't get me wrong, it's not all you do. It's really important, it's really focused, it's very intense. Baseball is really intense. It's all based on phosphate. When the ball's out of play, nothing's happening. When the ball's in play, it's sprinting everywhere, whether it be the pitcher throwing the ball as fast as they can, or the hitter hitting as hard as they can, or the outfielder sprinting for, or the infielder getting the ball and throwing it to first base, or the catcher catching it and throwing to second base. They run the runner out. Everything is really, really fast. So all of a sudden I have this team of pitchers doing slow, long endurance, and I thought that's very interesting. Didn't make any sense. So from a common sense, didn't make sense. From a position, well, they're jogging, but really the position of pitching is this, not this. So a position overall doesn't really relate. From a biomechanics, well, yeah, the legs don't do this when you're pitching. The legs, you can't see my legs, but there's a technique in doing the legs. So there's maybe better things you can do biomechanically for your legs, whether it be squats or single leg step ups or something like that, because it's unilateral with a rotation and you put force. But I'm not going to go into that. So from a biomechanics, it doesn't make sense. You don't pitch with the arms like this, jogging. This is the throwing action. So then you go into the muscle anatomy. When you look at, pitching is all fast twitch. It's a light load with maximal speed, phosphate generation, but fastest muscle activation, fast for the whole body and winding it. Yet you train the body slowly. Physiology, it's all based on phosphate. It's not even using creatine phosphate. It's just ATP, because this happens within a second of the throw. You don't even have to use ATP to endure that high expression of force. Yet the long distance running is aerobic. It's aerobic energy system, where this is phosphate energy. Long distance is slow twitch muscle fibers. You're not even using the upper body, where pitching is fast twitch muscle fibers. So from a physiology, it doesn't matter, and even from a mental mindset, pitching is very focused. It's very you get into that zone, and then you have to play mind games with your opponent. So again, using that example, that didn't make a lot of sense. And unfortunately, some of the pitchers, as they went into the season, they had a great start of the season, but by the end, a lot of them were getting due to all that added volume of training. They were overtraining, they were losing strength, they were losing muscle, and some of them actually got injured. And sometimes that extra foundation training is not appropriate to the outcomes that you want, but it can be contradictory, because slow distance is going to add that volume of repetitive strain through the body, a bit of muscle wastage, a loss of strength, and eventually an injury. And that's the last thing we want for you or your clients or your sporting team, whatever it might be. So there's a classic example of using baseball as an analogy. Now, as you know, I'm a fighter. I've done boxing in my younger days, and judo and taekwondo, and I was a professional kickboxer in the day. So obviously how I used to train when I was young, I still compete to this day. And because I'm a bit more vintage of age, I had to be smarter. But I started learning to get smarter and using anatomy and physiology and biomechanics as my guidance in my early career, rather than and this is how he did it back in the old days, and back in the Jack Jackson days, or Jack Dempsey days, wherever it might be, or Jack Johnson I'm referring to, all the different old boxers. So I found a lot of the things that boxers or kickboxers did. I thought that doesn't make any common sense, it doesn't make any positional sense, biomechanical sense, anatomical sense, physiology sense, or even mental sense. I use a classic example of one component of this, of which I used to do in my early years, but I stopped doing it because it didn't make any sense. There's a lot of boxers or kickboxers or fighters, they would build a foundation by, in the morning, what do they do? Like in the Rocky movie, they get up and they raw eggs, boom. I'm not going to open up that little box. And they go for a long 5-10K run in the morning, and they go for a jog. And a lot of the time it's basically a plug jog. They might do a bit of a sprint at the end, up the stairs like Rocky, or sprint at the end. And the fruit people throw fruit at you. You probably know if you watch the Rocky series. But a lot of it, though, is a tradition. They always start the morning with a long, and that builds that cardiovascular, that foundation, that base to endure through the 5 rounds, 10 rounds, 15 rounds. So first of all, what fighting you're doing, I only have to do 2 2-minute rounds now in the style of fighting which I do, which is ITF Taekwondo, and a bit of Waco kickboxing. When I was younger, as a professional kickboxer, I used to do 10 rounds. So obviously, I probably need a bit more endurance to get through the 10 rounds. But what is interesting, if you look at jogging for the fighting, first of all, it goes back to common sense. Why am I doing this? And you see people jogging around the ring or the mat? that's not what they do in the ring. They don't plug jog around the ring, but that's what you're doing for your training. So common sense, it doesn't make any common sense. From a body position, I'm upright, I'm rhythmical in a straight line, but when I'm boxing, I'm jumping around and going lateral and going around and all that. So I'm moving around. So straight away, the position of my position is very different than when I'm jogging. From a biomechanical point of view, when I'm moving around in boxing or kickboxing or fighting arts, whatever, or combat sports, a lot of the time I'm on the ball of the feet. I'm on the ball of the foot, I'm going lateral, I'm coming around this way, through in and out. But plug jogging is just, I'm actually doing running heel toe, upright, rhythmical arms. So you may say, well, that biomechanics and that position is not really relevant to fighting. Maybe an idea is to get fitter doing what you're going to get fit for, rather than getting fitter for something which you're not going to do and hoping it's going to have some crossover effect. And don't get me wrong, every form of training will have some form of crossover effect, but the idea of this is to maximize that crossover effect so you can train more effectively and efficiently and stop wasting time, and most importantly, not get injured, because that adds a lot of volume and repetitive strain to the body. Then you have a look at the muscular activation. Then if you look at muscular wise in fighting, a lot of it's fast twitch. I don't punch slowly, my goal is to punch quickly. So if I'm fighting here, I'll boom, 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 move around, duck weave, up, ba, boom, and ta-ta. Everything's fast. Ideally when I hit someone, I hit fast, because power equals speed by strength, without opening that too much into that. But now I'm actually training slow twitch muscle fibers, where a lot of the time, yes, I move around and I'm using my slow twitch to get into position, but sometimes I use my fast twitch to get out of the way or to bob underneath, and I use my fast to jab or to kick. So again, I'm using different anatomy or different muscle fiber types. And then if you look at physiology, long distance running is all aerobic. However, when I perform in the ring for that 2 minutes or 3 minutes, a lot of that is anaerobic or phosphate. You know, it's phosphate in terms of fast, but if I need to keep doing it, ba, 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 boom, 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 then that's extended going into anaerobic. And when do I use aerobic? When I break away and catch my breath. Or at the end of the round, go and sit in the corner and catch my breath. So yes, I'm using my aerobic energy system to break down my fats and glycogen to release the energy to rebuild my ATP, so I can rebuild it all up for the next round, but also aerobically to buffer and oxidize the lactic acid that I build up in that round. And you may say, well, isn't that why you do long distance running? Yeah, but that's activating the aerobic system in a completely different environment. That's the aerobic system, plug jogging in a straight line to increase that, but you'll be maybe better off developing your aerobic energy system the way it functions in a fight or any form of interval type sport, whether it be boxing or whether it be soccer or whether it be basketball, which is this interval where you have a work-rest ratio, where long distance running is long work but a low intensity, where a lot of interval sports are high work and then you have a rest, whether it be a rest in walking in the, like rugby league, you run up very far, bang, and you do a tackle or get tackled, phosphate, anaerobic, do a few of them in a row, lactate, then you go back in the line, catch your breath, use your aerobic energy system. So it'd be more specific to condition your aerobic energy system the way it performs in the sport, rather than condition it in an unrelated way and hoping it's going to have a crossover, because it's never going to be the same training it this way, a long distance, versus as a form to recover from anaerobic bouts of high intense activity. So from a physiological point of view, doesn't also make a lot of sense. And even from the mental point of view, you know, I am very conscious that when I train according to the focuses that I perform at. So if you work in the bag, I'm not just lazy working the bag. That bag is an opponent that I'm focused on, and every round is at 100% intensity and focus, because that's how it has to be in the boxing ring or in the basketball court or whether it be in the soccer field, because if you get a mental mind shift, that could open up a gap that someone will hit you or score a goal against you, whether it be tennis, whatever. I mean, you've got to be focused at all times. Yeah, where long distance running, you can your mind can wander off with the fairies, so you're not really conditioning your mind appropriate to the mental mindset and the focus and the concentration and get into that zone. So train the zone. And someone like Michael Jordan was a classic of that. He trained at 100% because he performed at 100%. Because in sport, you don't raise to your level of expectations, you lower down to the level of training. So the more intense and specific your training is, you're going to lower down to that level. You're not going to raise to those expectations of hope. So that's an example of using something which I'm more experienced in is boxing or the combat sports. Another example might be powerlifting, and I've been involved in obviously in strength and power in the times where I've come across people who are saying, I'm going to develop because powerlifting is 1 RM bench press, 1 RM squat, 1 RM deadlift. And I see a lot of time people doing a high amount of volume of work, where they might be doing, say, 15 sets of 12 repetitions. And I say, why are you doing 15 sets or 10 sets of 15? Why are you doing this high volume of work? Why are you doing 15 sets of 10 or 10 sets of 10 when you're in the sporting performance, you only do 1 set of 1? That doesn't make any sense, because 15 sets is completely common sense, doesn't make any common sense. From a body position, you're more in you look in the right body position when you're doing a high load or a low load. But also remember, biomechanically, your body position will change subtly in a high load versus a low load. I remember a study which I was reading once from a biomechanics research study analysing the biomechanics of doing a 1 RM squat versus a 10 RM squat. And they found when you lighten the load to do a higher reps, your body position subtly changed than in doing a 1 RM squat. Because when you do a 1 RM squat, you don't have any room for error. You go slightly off with a 1 RM, you're going down. But we've got a 10 RM, you can have got a bit more room for error, so you can be a bit more complacent, you can be more adaptive in your technique to do it. So the biomechanics of the joint angles and the movement of the angles in a 1 RM was very different to a 10 RM or a 15 RM. And that's the same with running. The biomechanics of jogging, because I can be a bit more lapsed and not as focused in my technical aspects of my joints, versus sprinting where everything counts. I guess it's like if I have a light ball and you say, can you gently throw me the ball, or it might be throw a tissue or whatever, and I get there and I go, okay, there you go. And I only have to throw it a metre. But if I have to get that same ball and I have to throw it at 100% maximal effort, because I'm in a Major League Baseball pitching team, and this is then when I throw that ball, I can throw it like that, am I? I can get away with that, right? I can get away with it. And I don't need to wind it right up for a half-hearted throw. So if I want to throw it hard, I'm going to woof and line it up to maximize the speed and acceleration, the power and the effect of the throw. Versus, so when I use light loads, over biomechanics can subtly and sometimes dramatically change. So doing 10 RM squats versus 1 RM squats could be biomechanics, because you could be conditioning your body in a wrong biomechanical pattern, doing low weight and high repetitions. If you want to train for powerlifting, if that's the sport that you're training for. So again, it's taking into account the biomechanics. I remember I used to work at the Australian Institute of Sport, and one of my colleagues was looking after, so I looked after the kayakers, and I won't go too much into this one, but I said, what were they doing in the gym? And they're doing power cleans, power lifts and Olympic lifts, and they became quite popular in the 90s, because they thought, well, Olympic lifters and power lifters are powerful, therefore if I get my athletes to do those lifts, then they'll become powerful and fast. And that's great. That's like saying, well, a donkey is really strong and all that bit, therefore I get my giraffe to do the same thing the donkey does, and that may break its legs. If you train someone who's maybe genetically gifted to do Olympic lifts and powerlifting, because they've got short levers and they're stocky and they have all those added benefits from a genetics point of view, and then you get someone who's built like a praying mantis to train that way, then that may actually cause injury because they're not biomechanically built for that way. And the classic example was the swimmers who are breaststrokers, and they're doing Olympic lifts, cleans and jerks and all sorts of stuff. So from just looking at that, is why are they doing this when they're in a pool doing that? And I won't go through the whole questions I asked, but just straight away, that doesn't even tick the common sense cycle. There might be better ways to build a foundation, and better ways that are more related or more specific to the outcomes that they want. So you got to look at what foundation that you need. A lot of time people will try to build a foundation on the extreme. I'll finish off with this, where they'll look at an elite marathon runner and they'll train their way to build their ability to run a marathon. But you've got to remember, they're elite. If you try to drive your car the way a Formula One driver drives their car, you probably bust it up and crash it, because it's not genetically designed that way or conditioned that way. Rory's a classic, where she loves marathons. She's run 21 marathons, an amazing feat, and she runs marathons every year. And she's not necessarily built like a Ethiopian or Kenyan female 50-kilogram runner with long, lean skin. Rory's more athletically built, so she's not really built for long distance from a weight to power ratio and the way she's designed. But she loves the challenge and the character building of running marathons. So therefore, her body's not really designed to do the massive amount of volume, doing 20k runs, 30k runs, 40k runs. And her life wasn't conducive to that. So she used her knowledge in anatomy and physiology and biomechanics and all that to design a program that's going to be best for her, that can achieve what she wants to achieve out of a marathon without actually hurting herself or overtraining or modeling off an extreme person when you're not an extreme person. So what she integrated into her lifestyle was really short, brief, high intensity interval training. And that got her physically strong. To founded that with she did a lot of strength training with that. They made her tendons and her bones and her muscles strong. She increased her cardiovascular fitness through more interval training, because it's more time efficient. It actually got her fitter faster. Her aerobic system was built through the recovery cycle of that. And with doing anywhere from 15 to 20-minute training sessions per day, she achieved quite great times in those 21 marathons. And for someone like that, just to do a sub 4-hour marathon is quite an amazing feat. But she didn't do the ridiculous, because a lot of time people will do massive amounts of foundation work for their first marathon. They'll burn themselves out, they'll overtrain, they'll get the marathon done, they'll finish the line and say, I'm never doing that again, because they compromised their whole life, and they did all this massive training that led to possibly injuries because they weren't conditioned for it, they're not genetically gifted for it. And some of the injuries I've had in the past, in my early kickboxing days, was not from the training in kickboxing, but from all the supplementary training. I ended up getting plantar fasciitis, I started getting osteitis, patellofemoral syndrome, and that didn't come from the quality brief sessions of boxing and kickboxing. They came from the long road runs and the distance work and the plug jogging, because that created that repetitive strain injury. So that was not necessarily building a foundation, that was actually breaking the foundation. So you've got to be careful that your training is building the foundation with the right intensity, with the right frequency, with the right training tool to make sure it's specific. So just to recap, those things that you can ask yourself for any training program: number one, does it make common sense? Number two, is the body in the right position? Look at the sport, look at the outcome. From like if it's a shadow, where they have those screens with the light in the background. If you look at the shadow of the sport, then you look at the shadow of the training. Do you say, could you sort of see some relation to it? Well, body position doesn't make a lot of sense. Then the next to break it further down from that. And if it does make any common sense, then you probably don't even have to go any further. But if it doesn't even tick the body position box, you don't even have to go any further. Why would I go swimming to get fitter for running? Why do I go swimming to get fitter for cycling? You're not going to have a good crossover, as good a crossover in actually doing the activity. That's called specificity of training. Then the next breakdown is looking at the biomechanics, which is the joints. Again, look at individual joints, the foot, the action joints, obviously, that contribute to the performance, so break it down into the joints. Then you can look at the muscles. What are the muscles? Are they performing at the fastest fibers? Are they slow twitch fibers? Are they more endurance? Are they power? Are they strength? Are they agility? And the muscles. So look at the muscles and the performance of the muscles. Are they in line with the outcomes that you want? Why train slow if I want to go fast? Why train on the ground if I perform in the upright position. So these are just some common things. Then you look at the physiology. It means is the duration of the event, is the work-rest ratios, the energy systems. Is it phosphate? Is it more lactate? Is it aerobic? Or is it a combination of those, such as interval type sports such as basketball and boxing and all sorts of stuff where you have different ratios? And are you training according to the ratios that's going to build a great appropriate foundation specific to the sport to give you the ideal outcome? And then the mindset, are you going to be focused? And my last example of doing a 10 RM squat or a 50 RM squat versus 1 RM squat, the mindset of doing a 1 RM is very different than the mindset of, hey, you can sort of mess up the first couple and it's not going to make any difference. At the start of a marathon, you can mess up the start and trip and go, oh damn, scratch your head, tie up your shoelace and still run, and you have plenty of time to make it up and win the event. But you don't have that at 100-meter sprint. You have to be 100% on mentally and physically to win the event. So the last one is, does your training not just develop the body but also develop the mind to get you in there, that physical and the mental zone, to get the outcomes that you want in an effective, time efficient, but most importantly a safe way? Because if you're injured because you do too much or too much of the wrong thing or biomechanically the wrong thing, then that's going to lead to injury. And if you're injured, then that's the end of your goals, because you can't train to get your goals. So, hope that's been helpful. Ask those questions, be honest, and I'll see you in the next K-Max.